You know what? I've been trying to talk about grinders for the past 4 days to this camera, and I can't seem to put it in a way that makes sense or that I'm happy with. So here's my thoughts on the grinder space. Basically everything at the top is a 98mm grinder. They all seem to have basically the same burrs. Once you have that, these high-end grinders really have to satisfy 2 features. That's it. They're basic, they're simple. All you need to do is be properly aligned and not have a crap ton of retention. If you can solve those 2 problems, everything else, it's just workflow. It's just little trade-offs that cost you anywhere from $500 to $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for a single little trade-off. If a grinder satisfies these 2 basic principles, at the end of the day, you're gonna be happy with what it does. It's just about finding the one that fits your style. The specifications on all these grinders, every single one of them is going to be fantastic, it seems. Everybody talks about 20 micron runouts or less. So we're really just looking at lathes that sit under table that need to have 2 grinding surfaces parallel to each other and be robust to some stresses in the grinding process. So yeah, the Levercraft Ultra kicks ass. If that's all you were looking for, if you were interested in my workflow and everything like that, just the big takeaway, it's a fantastic grinder. And at the price point, it's a bargain. It's basically the cheapest grinder in the 98mm space that's single dosing and low retention. You've got the shoebox that sits next to it, but you've got a servo motor instead of a DC brushless motor, which means you have immense control over the RPMs. You can essentially mimic other grinders with this grinder. You can put the optional 80mm burr carrier in there and adjust your RPMs and boom, you got a ditting suite. That's super, super cool. If you're the type of person that likes to tinker, this grinder is fantastic. The next step is retention. A high-end grinder should have low retention. Everyone can agree on that. And I've pulled 4 shots a day for 6 weeks probably now, so I've got almost 100 samples. And the variance on in versus out on almost every single one of my shots is less than 0.2 grams. That's my criteria for great retention. If it's less than 0.2 grams, phenomenal. If I use the Ross droplet technique, then I can get my retention down below 0.1 grams, which is, it's basically, you basically can't get anything better than that. All of the issues that you would think would come with a grinder that has the burrs parallel to the floor go out the window because of the servo that they chose to use in this grinder. You've got a servo with a 1500 RPM limit, which is blistering for a 98mm grinder, which will essentially, the sweepers will do their job and purge essentially everything in the chamber, which is great. You know, I find this video kind of funny because Michael Fabian just did part 2 of his Q&A about all of the grinders that he reviewed, and he purposely made a point to leave out workflow, which is very, very interesting. Shout out to him. If you haven't seen his videos, go check them out. He did a great roundup of a bunch of different grinders, but a lot of people seem to have lost the plot because he was sort of reviewing what came out in the cup at the end, which fundamentally is a review of burr geometry and alignment. My video is a little bit different because I'm focusing almost completely on workflow, because I think if your grinder is over $2,000 USD and you can't get alignment and retention right, you've lost the plot and should just stop making grinders. Because in the single dosing, low retention space, that's the criteria for a grinder. Beyond that, it's all about what a user wants and what kind of aesthetic they're looking for. Rewind. So how did I end up with the Levercraft Ultra? Well, I had my Super Jolly and I love that grinder. I did everything to that grinder. I removed the doser, I removed the hopper, I swapped the burrs, I shimmed the burrs, I sanded the burr carriers, and I got that grinder to essentially its ultimate Super Saiyan form that was, you know, unparalleled in the Super Jolly space. And then I ran into a man from Oslo, and this man from Oslo, Timmy Wendlebeans, a certain man from Oslo, a fantastic roaster that specializes in incredibly light roast coffees, had a coffee called Finca Tamana. And this is my favorite coffee to date. When dialed and extracted perfectly by my standards, I find it to be the most pleasing thing that I have ever consumed. But this coffee is high elevation and incredibly dense. So when I grind it, it occupies less space in my basket than any other coffee, even at the same 18-gram dose. And what that means is that the grinder struggles. My Super Jolly was not able to handle this coffee unless I fed it like 3 or 4 grams at a time. And that was the only reason I wanted to upgrade. And that's why I ended up with the Levercraft Ultra, because at that point, I went through the same process that I've talked to you guys about today. It's, if we make the assumption that everyone who makes these grinders has been successful in fulfilling their 2 promises to the consumer, that the burrs are going to be aligned and that they're not going to have a crap ton of retention, then everything after that becomes personal preference, workflow, space considerations, cost considerations, all the things that we're looking for. And at the end of the day, I wanted to be a little bit different. A company that is new to the grinder space brought something that appeared to be novel, and I wanted to be one of the first people in that space to put my hands on it and really understand whether or not it fulfills that contract of low retention and well-aligned burrs. And by all indications, it appears to do that. All these things considered, I think they fulfilled their contract to the customer. I think they've built an exceptional product that's fun to use and, more importantly for me, fun to play with because of all the different things that they're constantly doing and introducing, and RPM profiling and tinkering, and the possibility of the 80 millimeter burr carrier. So if I want to taste what a Ditting Sweet sounds like, I can put the 80 millimeter carrier in there and swap the burr set, and and adjust the RPMs, and I've essentially got a Ditting Sweet that I can pull from for a couple weeks and then swap the carrier out, and I have the same grinder that I was used to before that. I think that sort of modularity is really, really cool, and something that'll become more important in the grinder space as all these fantastic manufacturers continue to manufacture new products that bring novel innovations to the market. At this point, I turn it back to you guys. How do you feel about my assertion that really grinding companies or companies manufacturing grinders just need to fulfill those 2 things and everything else is workflow? Do you completely disagree with that? Should I be spending more time focusing on the flavor profile that I get in the cup? Is that what people want to hear when they're talking about grinding reviews? Because at the end of the day, I think those turn, as long as the grinder is good, they turn into more burr geometry reviews, which has a massive impact on taste. But I think if you put SSP high uniformity burrs in a Profitec Monolith Max next to a Levercraft Ultra next to a well-aligned EK, I don't think you're going to be able to tell the difference very much besides the fine production from the RPMs. Beyond that, I don't know. You tell me. If this is your first time on my channel, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any more of my content. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the thumbs up, share it with your friends. If you have any content that you would like to see or would like discussed, comment it down below. And as always, have a nice